Imagine walking through a once bustling city, now completely silent. The only sounds are your footsteps echoing off empty buildings and the occasional whisper of wind moving through forgotten rooms. Time seems frozen, yet simultaneously racing forward as nature reclaims what humans left behind. This is the surreal experience of visiting the most hauntingly beautiful abandoned places on Earth. What is it about abandoned places that captivates our imagination so powerfully? Perhaps it is the stark reminder of our own mortality, or maybe it is the eerie beauty that emerges when human ambition collides with the unstoppable forces of time and nature. These forgotten places tell stories of dreams, disasters, economic shifts, and radical changes that altered the course of human history. Today we are embarking on a virtual journey to the 10 most surreal abandoned places you can actually visit on our planet. From radiation zones where time stopped in an instant, to opulent resorts where luxury has given way to decay. Each location offers a window into parallel universes where human presence has faded, but not completely vanished. What makes these places truly surreal is not just their emptiness, but how they challenge our perception of permanence. Cities and buildings we construct with such conviction, as if they will stand forever, can be abandoned within a single generation. Nature does not hesitate to reclaim what we leave behind, creating otherworldly landscapes where vines crawl through windows and sand dunes fill grand ballrooms. Some of these locations have become accidental time capsules, preserving moments of history exactly as they were when the last person closed the door. In this journey, you will discover not only where these remarkable places are located, but also how you can visit them yourself. We will explore the fascinating histories that led to their abandonment and what makes each one uniquely worth experiencing. You will learn about the practical considerations for visiting these sites, including which ones require special permits or guided tours, and which ones you can explore independently. So prepare yourself for a journey through time and abandoned spaces as we explore the 10 most surreal abandoned places to visit on Earth. Places where reality seems to blend with fantasy, creating experiences that will stay with you long after you return to the familiar comforts of the populated world. Are you ready to begin? Our journey begins in what might be the most famous abandoned place on Earth, Pripyat, Ukraine. Once a thriving Soviet city of nearly 50,000 people, Pripyat was evacuated in just 3 hours following the catastrophic Chernobyl nuclear disaster on April 26, 1986. The residents were told they would return in just a few days. Instead, this city became frozen in time, a haunting monument to one of the worst nuclear accidents in human history. What makes Pripyat truly surreal is not just its sudden abandonment, but how it has transformed in the decades since. Nature has reclaimed the city in ways that create dreamlike contrasts. Imagine a Ferris wheel that never gave its first ride, now surrounded by a forest that has grown through the cracked concrete. Schoolrooms with assignments, still written on chalkboards, textbooks open on desks as if students just stepped away. The most iconic image of Pripyat is perhaps its amusement park, scheduled to open just days after the disaster. The yellow bumper cars and the massive Ferris wheel stand as silent sentinels, slowly rusting away. Soviet propaganda posters still cling to walls in government buildings, their bold colors faded, but their messages intact, creating an eerie time capsule of late Soviet life. Despite what many believe, Pripyat can be visited safely today. The radiation levels have decreased significantly in most areas, though visitors must still follow strict safety protocols. Licensed tour operators offer day trips from Kiev, taking visitors through radiation checkpoints before entering the exclusion zone. Once inside, you will visit the abandoned city, see the infamous Reactor 4 now covered by its massive protective shield, and experience firsthand how nature reclaims what humans leave behind. What visitors often find most surprising about Pripyat is the wildlife. In the absence of human activity, the area has become something of an accidental nature reserve. Wolves, bears, bison, and countless bird species now inhabit the forests that have grown throughout the abandoned city. It is as if the disaster that drove humans away created a sanctuary for the natural world. But be warned, while tourism to Pripyat has increased dramatically in recent years, this is not a typical sightseeing destination. The empty buildings are deteriorating, making some areas dangerous to enter, and while radiation levels are safe for short visits, this remains the site of a nuclear disaster. Respect for both the natural hazards and the human tragedy that occurred here is essential. But what happens when political collapse, rather than environmental disaster, leads to abandonment? Our next destinations take us to the mountains of Georgia, where the fall of an empire left behind ghostly monuments to Soviet ambition, now slowly crumbling into obscurity. Our journey now takes us deep into the Caucasus Mountains of Georgia, where two remarkable Soviet-era ghost towns offer windows into the USSR's once glorious past. These abandoned places, Akarmara and Tskaltubo, embody different sides of Soviet ambition. One a model mining community, the other a luxurious spa retreat for the communist elite. Today, both stand as hauntingly beautiful monuments to a collapsed empire. Let's begin in Akarmara, a remote mining settlement nestled in the mountains of Abkhazia. Founded in the 1940s, this was once a showpiece of Soviet industrial might and social engineering. The town was built to house coal miners and their families in what was considered exceptional comfort by Soviet standards. Multi-story apartment buildings lined streets adorned with decorative lampposts. Workers enjoyed amenities, including a cinema, cultural center, and even a cable car system connecting the residential areas to the mines, remarkable luxury for industrial workers of that era. What makes Akarmara truly surreal today is how completely a once thriving community has been reclaimed by nature, while architectural elements of Soviet grandeur remain visible through the overgrowth. Imagine ornate apartment buildings with classical columns and elaborate facades now draped in vines, their staircases collapsing, but still displaying traces of marble finishes. Picture a decaying cinema, where moss grows over Soviet-era murals, celebrating the heroism of the working class. The cable car system that once transported miners now consists only of rusting towers emerging from dense forest. The town's abandonment began after the Soviet Union's collapse, when the mines became unprofitable and industrial supply chains broke down. The Georgian-Abkhazian conflict of 1992 to 1993 accelerated the exodus, with most inhabitants fleeing the violence. Today, remarkably, a handful of residents, fewer than 50, continue to live among the ruins, creating surreal scenes of inhabited apartments nestled within otherwise abandoned buildings. Just a few hours' drive away lies our second ghostly wonder, Tskaltubo. Once one of the Soviet Union's most prestigious spa resorts, this town's story represents the leisure rather than labor side of the Soviet system, but its abandonment is equally striking. Unlike many Soviet projects characterized by utilitarian functionality, Tskaltubo was designed to impress. Elaborate sanatoriums and bathhouses were built around natural mineral springs in various architectural styles, from classical to Stalinist empire to Soviet modernism. What makes Tskaltubo particularly fascinating is that it once hosted the Soviet elite, including Joseph Stalin himself, who had his own private bathhouse and suite. The town's grandiose sanatoriums, essentially health-oriented hotels, could accommodate up to 5,000 visitors, with workers throughout the USSR receiving state-sponsored vacations here as rewards for exceptional service. Wandering through Tskaltubo today creates an almost dreamlike experience. Ornate ballrooms with crystal chandelier fixtures still hanging from elaborately molded ceilings now gather dust above cracked marble floors. Mosaics depicting happy Soviet citizens enjoying the waters remain vibrant despite decades of neglect. Grand colonnaded entrances that once welcomed party officials now frame views of overgrown gardens where monumental statues peer through the foliage. The abandonment of Tskaltubo, like Akarmara, was triggered by the Soviet Union's collapse in 1991. Without state funding and the organized system of worker vacations, the spa town's purpose evaporated. The Georgian Civil War of the early 1990s delivered the final blow when many of the buildings were repurposed to house refugees from the Abkhazian conflict. Some of these displaced people and their descendants still occupy parts of certain sanatoriums, creating the surreal juxtaposition of improvised family homes inside deteriorating Soviet grandeur. What makes visiting these twin abandoned places particularly special is experiencing physical manifestations of a vanished empire's dreams and aspirations. Both towns were built with a sense of permanence and optimism about the Soviet future that now seems tragically misplaced. The grand architecture, once symbols of communist achievement, now stands as hollow shells, their decay accelerated by looting of anything valuable, from copper wiring to decorative elements. For photographers and urban explorers, these locations offer a dreamlike aesthetic where symmetrical Soviet architecture gradually surrenders to nature's chaos. The quality of light filtering through broken windows onto peeling propaganda posters creates otherworldly scenes that seem designed for camera lenses. Today, both sites are gaining recognition among adventurous travelers, with Tskaltubo in particular seeing early efforts at preservation and even restoration of some buildings. But for now, they remain among the most atmospheric and historically significant abandoned places you can visit. Time capsules of Soviet ambitions slowly dissolving back into the Georgian landscape. But what if, instead of being slowly reclaimed by nature, an abandoned place was completely isolated by the sea? Our next destination takes us to a man-made island, where concrete and steel create an entirely different kind of ghost town, one that rises directly from the ocean waves. Our next destination takes us to the waters off Nagasaki, Japan, where a concrete island rises from the sea like an abandoned battleship. This is Hashima Island, also known as Gunkanjima, or Battleship Island, due to its distinctive profile on the horizon. Once one of the most densely populated places on Earth, this 16-acre island is now completely abandoned, its concrete apartment blocks slowly crumbling into the sea. Hashima Island's story begins in 1887, when the Mitsubishi Corporation discovered a rich coal seam beneath the sea floor near this tiny island. They expanded the natural island with concrete, eventually creating a completely artificial landmass that housed workers for the underwater coal mines. By 1959, an incredible 5,259 people lived on this tiny plot of land, creating a population density 9 times that of Manhattan during the same period. What makes Hashima truly surreal is its concentrated urbanity now devoid of human life. Picture this, a complete city with apartment blocks rising up to 9 stories high, a school, hospital, temple, restaurants, markets, even a swimming pool, all packed onto a space smaller than a dozen football fields. Now picture all of that completely empty, with nothing but the sound of waves crashing against the sea wall and wind whistling through broken windows. Life on Hashima was remarkable in its organization. Families lived in apartments as small as 10 square meters, with communal bathrooms and kitchens. Despite these cramped conditions, residents created a vibrant community, with rooftop gardens, a cinema, and even a pachinko parlor. Children played in the tiny concrete courtyards between buildings, never knowing the feel of grass beneath their feet. The island's abandonment came suddenly, when petroleum replaced coal as Japan's primary fuel source in the 1960s. The mines became less profitable. In January 1974, Mitsubishi announced the mine's closure, and by April the island was completely deserted. In the rush to leave, residents abandoned many personal belongings, which could still be seen decades later. For many years, Hashima was strictly off-limits to visitors, as the dangerous deterioration of buildings made exploration hazardous. However, in 2009, Japan opened portions of the island to tourism, and in 2015, it was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site as part of Japan's Sites of the Meiji Industrial Revolution. Today, visitors can take boat tours from Nagasaki that include a guided walk along a specially constructed viewing pathway on the island. What visitors find most striking about Hashima is how it presents as a microcosm of urban decay. Unlike many abandoned places that are slowly being reclaimed by nature, Hashima's concrete jungle is simply falling apart. Staircases lead to nowhere. Collapsed ceilings expose the sky, and rusted metal reinforcements protrude from crumbling concrete, creating an apocalyptic cityscape that has fascinated photographers and filmmakers. It even served as inspiration for the villain's lair in the James Bond film Skyfall. But what if, instead of decay, an abandoned place was meticulously preserved exactly as it was left? Our next destination takes us to a ghost town where time hasn't just stopped. It's been deliberately frozen. Our journey now takes us to the eastern slopes of California's Sierra Nevada mountains, where the remarkably preserved ghost town of Bodie stands in a state of arrested decay. Unlike many abandoned places that have been heavily vandalized or reclaimed by nature, Bodie offers visitors an authentic glimpse into the past, with buildings and interiors maintained exactly as they were left when the last residents departed decades ago. Founded in 1859 after the discovery of gold in the area, Bodie quickly grew from a small mining camp to a booming town of 10,000 people by 1880. At its peak, Bodie had 65 saloons, numerous brothels, opium dens, a Chinatown, and a reputation for lawlessness that led to the creation of the Bad Man from Bodie legend. It was a place where killings occurred with alarming frequency, sometimes over the smallest disagreements. What makes Bodie surreal isn't dramatic natural reclamation or catastrophic destruction, but rather its eerily perfect preservation. Walking through Bodie today feels like stepping through a time portal. Peek through the windows of the abandoned buildings, and you'll see tables still set for dinner, shelves stocked with goods in the general store, and personal belongings exactly where they were left. Even the pool table in the saloon still has balls resting on the felt, as if the players had just stepped away for a moment. Bodie's decline was gradual, beginning in the late 1880s as the gold began to run out and miners moved on to more promising locations. The town limped along into the 20th century, with a small but determined population keeping it alive until the last mine closed. The final permanent residents left in the 1950s, but not before the state of California had designated Bodie a state historic park in 1962, ensuring its preservation. Today, approximately 110 structures remain standing, representing about 5% of the buildings that existed during Bodie's heyday. The site is maintained in a state of arrested decay, meaning buildings are prevented from completely collapsing, but are not restored to their original condition. This preservation policy creates the unique atmosphere that makes Bodie stand out among ghost towns. Nothing is reconstructed or fixed up to look new. Instead, buildings are simply prevented from falling down. Visitors to Bodie can freely walk the dusty streets, peer into buildings, and experience the isolation that characterized life in this remote mining town. The high desert location at 8,379 feet elevation means weather can be extreme, with winter temperatures often dropping well below freezing and summer bringing intense sun and occasional violent thunderstorms. This harsh environment has helped preserve wooden structures that might have quickly rotted in more humid climates. What makes a visit to Bodie particularly special is the sense of authenticity. Unlike many historic sites that have been carefully curated or reconstructed, Bodie presents history as it really was. There are no actors in period costumes, no gift shops selling souvenirs, no modern facilities beyond the most basic necessities. Just a genuine ghost town, preserved by its remote location and the dry desert air, offering a window into the rugged reality of America's gold rush era. But while Bodie was gradually abandoned over decades, what happens when a town with over 1,000 years of history is forced to evacuate due to the very ground beneath it giving way? Our next destination takes us to a medieval town where the forces of geology created a ghost town far older than any we've seen so far. We now travel across the Atlantic to southern Italy, where perched dramatically atop a steep cliff in the Basilicata region sits Craco, a medieval ghost town with over 1,000 years of history. Unlike many abandoned places that were deserted due to economic factors or single catastrophic events, Craco's story is one of gradual surrender to the forces of nature, culminating in its complete abandonment in 1991. Founded around the 8th century, Craco grew into a significant medieval center with a university, 4 large plazas, and a population of about 2,000 people by the 13th century. Its strategic position atop a 1,300-foot cliff made it naturally defensible, with spectacular views across the surrounding countryside. The town's skyline was dominated by a Norman tower built in 1040 and later by the monastery of St. Peter. What makes Craco surreal today is its dramatic silhouette against the sky and the haunting beauty of a town slowly dissolving back into the landscape. Imagine a cluster of stone buildings clinging to a steep hill, with narrow winding streets leading to a castle at the summit, all gradually crumbling as if the town itself is melting. The pale stone structures almost appear to grow organically from the clay hillside, creating an otherworldly scene that has attracted filmmakers, including those who shot scenes for Quantum of Solace, The Passion of the Christ, and Christ Stopped at Eboli. Craco's decline began in the early 1900s, when many residents emigrated to America due to poor agricultural conditions. But it was nature that delivered the final blows. A series of landslides in 1963 damaged much of the town and forced many remaining residents to relocate to a valley below. In 1972, a devastating flood made conditions worse, and a powerful earthquake in 1980 rendered the town unsafe for habitation. The last 700 residents were forced to abandon their ancestral home in 1991. Today, the town stands as a ghost of its former self, with partially collapsed buildings, exposed rooms, and streets overtaken by debris. The Church of San Nicola still stands, though its roof has long since disappeared. Inside, fragments of sacred frescoes can still be seen on the walls, faded but hauntingly beautiful reminders of the town's religious life. Visitors can now experience Craco through guided tours that take small groups through safe pathways in the abandoned town. Hard hats are required as falling debris remains a concern. The tours often begin at a visitor center that tells the story of the town through photographs and artifacts, before leading guests up to experience the abandoned streets and buildings firsthand. What makes visiting Craco particularly special is experiencing how a millennium of human history is slowly being reclaimed by the same geological forces that made the location both strategic and ultimately uninhabitable. The town doesn't just represent abandonment, it demonstrates the temporary nature of even our most solid-seeming creations when faced with the patient power of nature. Standing amidst the ruins of Craco, overlooking the dramatic badlands of Basilicata, visitors experience a profound sense of time's passage. The town has been featured on lists of the world's most beautiful abandoned places, and once you've seen the golden Italian sunlight illuminating its crumbling facades, it's easy to understand why this ghost town continues to capture the imagination of travelers from around the world. But what about places abandoned not because of natural disasters, but because of political upheaval? Our next destination might be the strangest abandoned place yet, a massive communist monument that looks like a flying saucer landed on a remote mountain peak. Our next destination takes us to the remote peaks of Bulgaria's Balkan Mountains, where a structure that looks like it was teleported from another planet dominates the skyline. This is the Buzludzha monument, an enormous saucer-shaped memorial built by the Bulgarian Communist Party between 1974 and 1981. Abandoned after the fall of communism, it now stands as one of the most spectacular ruins of the Soviet era. The monument was built to commemorate the founding of the Bulgarian Social Democratic Party, a predecessor to the Communist Party. Its construction was a massive undertaking, costing an estimated 14 million Bulgarian levs, equivalent to about 35 million US dollars today. Over 6,000 workers and 20 leading Bulgarian artists contributed to the project, creating what was intended to be a permanent symbol of communist triumph. What makes Buzludzha truly surreal is both its futuristic architecture and its current state of neglect. Picture a circular concrete structure that resembles a flying saucer, perched atop a mountain at 4,700 feet elevation, with a 230-foot tower adorned with red stars that once illuminated the night sky. The building's round main hall featured elaborate mosaics depicting communist heroes and ideals, covering more than 10,000 square feet of wall space. The ceiling displayed a hammer and sickle in precious stones. When communism fell in 1989, the Bulgarian government abandoned the monument, leaving it to the mercy of weather, looters, and vandals. Today, much of the original mosaic work has been damaged or stolen, though fragments of the once magnificent artwork remain visible. The concrete structure itself is deteriorating, with chunks falling away and water seeping in. Snow often enters through holes in the roof, creating surreal winter landscapes inside the main hall. For years, visitors had to access Buzludzha through unofficial means, climbing through broken windows or gaps in the structure, as the monument was technically closed to the public. However, the site has gained international attention through photographers and urban explorers who shared images of its decaying grandeur online. The monument's remote location adds to its mystique. Situated on a peak that can be surrounded by clouds and fog, Buzludzha often appears to be floating above the landscape. In winter, harsh winds create massive icicles that hang from the circular structure, enhancing its otherworldly appearance. Even getting to the monument requires dedication, with a winding mountain road leading to a final approach that must be completed on foot. Recently, conservation efforts have begun to preserve what remains of Buzludzha. The monument was placed on the World Monuments Fund's watch list in 2018, recognizing its cultural and architectural significance regardless of the political ideology it was built to celebrate. Plans are being developed to stabilize the structure and potentially open it officially as a museum and tourist attraction. What makes visiting Buzludzha particularly special is experiencing a physical manifestation of utopian political ideals now abandoned to decay. It serves as a concrete reminder of how quickly political systems can rise and fall, leaving behind enormous monuments that outlive the regimes that created them. The contrast between the monument's grandiose design and its current state of deterioration creates a powerful visual metaphor for the collapse of Soviet communism. But political ideologies aren't the only grand visions that get abandoned. Sometimes a single eccentric individual's dream can create an equally surreal abandoned place. Our next destination takes us to a castle that never was, built not for royalty, but for something far more unexpected. Our journey now brings us to a small island in the Hudson River, about 50 miles north of New York City. Here stands the romantic ruin of Bannerman Castle, a structure that looks like it was transported from the Scottish Highlands to the American East Coast. This fantastical building was never actually a castle, but rather a massive warehouse designed to look like one, built by a 19th century military surplus dealer with a flair for the dramatic. Francis Bannerman VI was a successful businessman who made his fortune buying and selling military surplus after the Civil War and Spanish-American War. By 1900, his business had grown so large that he needed a place to store his inventory of weapons, ammunition, and military equipment. He purchased Pripyat Island in 1900 and began construction on what he called Bannerman's Island Arsenal, designing the buildings himself with no formal architectural training. What makes Bannerman Castle surreal is its incongruous appearance and dramatic state of partial collapse. Imagine sailing up the Hudson River and suddenly encountering what appears to be a medieval Scottish castle rising from a small forested island. The main structure featured crenellated walls, turrets, and even had the words Bannerman's Island Arsenal built into the facade in 3-foot-high letters. Bannerman designed it as an advertisement visible to passengers on the river's steamboats and trains running along the shore. The castle's life as a functioning warehouse was relatively short. Construction began in 1901 but was never fully completed. After Bannerman's death in 1918, his family continued to use the island, but in 1920, a massive explosion destroyed part of the arsenal when 200 tons of shells and powder exploded. The business declined after World War II, and the family sold the island to New York State in 1967. Just 2 years later, a fire devastated the buildings, leaving only the dramatic shell we see today. For many years, the island was off-limits to the public, with the ruins considered too dangerous for visitors. However, in 1992, the Bannerman Castle Trust was formed and began working with New York State to stabilize the remaining structures and open the island for tours. Today, visitors can take guided tours that depart from Beacon or Newburgh, New York, during the warmer months. The tour experience is unlike any other abandoned place. Accessing the island by boat immediately creates a sense of adventure and separation from the modern world. As you approach, the castle ruins seem to emerge from the trees, creating a scene so picturesque it's hard to believe it's real. Once on the island, guides lead visitors along maintained paths, sharing the fascinating history of Bannerman and his unusual creation. The island has become something of a cultural destination as well, hosting theatrical performances, movie nights, and farm-to-table dinners during summer months. These events offer unique opportunities to experience the ruins at sunset or illuminated at night, adding another layer to the surreal quality of this accidental landmark. Bannerman Castle reminds us that not all abandoned places are the result of economic collapse or natural disaster. Some, like this fanciful warehouse, are simply the physical remains of one person's outsized imagination, left to slowly transform into something entirely different than what was originally intended. But what if an abandoned place was shaped not by human eccentricity, but by the very landscape itself? Our next destination takes us to a village perched so precariously on stone fingers that it seems to defy gravity, a place where nature and architecture merge to create one of the most dramatically situated ghost towns on Earth. Our journey now takes us back to southern Italy, where high in the mountains of Calabria sits one of the most dramatically situated ghost towns in the world. Pentedattilo derives its name from the Greek words Pentedaktilos, meaning 5 fingers, referring to the distinctive hand-shaped rock formation upon which the village was built. From a distance, the settlement appears to be perched precariously on the knuckles of a giant stone hand reaching up from the earth. Founded in 640 BCE by Greek colonists, Pentedattilo thrived for centuries as a strategic outpost overlooking the Strait of Messina. The village's history took a dark turn in 1686, when the local marquis, jealous of his fiancée's affection for another man, orchestrated the brutal murder of his rival and the rival's entire family. This event, known as the Alberti Massacre, gave rise to legends that the victim's bloodstains permanently marked the rocks, earning Pentedattilo a reputation for being haunted. What makes Pentedattilo truly surreal today is the juxtaposition of its dramatic natural setting with its quiet abandonment. Ancient stone houses built directly into massive rock formations create an organic synthesis of natural and human architecture. The buildings have become almost indistinguishable from the rocks that support them, appearing to have grown rather than being constructed. The village's decline began in the late 19th century when earthquakes damaged buildings and made the location increasingly unsafe. The final abandonment came gradually throughout the 20th century, with the last residents leaving in the 1960s when the lack of modern amenities and difficult access became too challenging. Unlike many abandoned places that deteriorate rapidly, Pentedattilo has been partially preserved through restoration efforts that began in the 1980s. While no one lives in the village permanently, artists have established workshops in some restored buildings, and a handful of structures have been converted into a simple hostel. Each summer, the ghost town briefly comes alive with a film festival using the dramatic setting for outdoor screenings. Walking through Pentedattilo feels like stepping into a world suspended between earth and sky, with panoramic views of the surrounding mountains, coastline, and Sicily visible across the strait on clear days. As sunset approaches, the village takes on an even more dramatic appearance, with golden light illuminating the weathered stone buildings and casting long shadows across the fingers of rock. Despite its small size, Pentedattilo leaves visitors with an outsized impression, demonstrating how location alone can transform an otherwise modest settlement into something extraordinary. It stands as a testament to human ingenuity and our ability to adapt to and inhabit even the most challenging environments. But what if an abandoned place was not clinging to rocky mountains, but instead slowly disappearing beneath shifting sands? Our next destination takes us to a desert where once opulent European buildings are gradually being swallowed whole, creating surreal indoor dunes that must be seen to be believed. We travel to the Namib Desert, where an entirely different force of nature has created one of the most visually stunning abandoned places on Earth. Kolmanskop was once a thriving diamond mining town, built in the early 1900s by German colonists, after a railway worker discovered diamonds in the area. In its heyday, this remote desert community had all the amenities of a prosperous European town, including a hospital, ballroom, power station, school, and even an ice factory. What makes Kolmanskop so mesmerizingly surreal today is the way the desert has reclaimed it. Step inside the once grand homes, and you will find sand dunes that have burst through doorways and windows, filling rooms with smooth, undulating hills of sand. Sunlight streams through broken ceilings, creating dramatic light beams that illuminate the encroaching desert. The contrast between the European architecture and the relentless natural force of the Namib Desert creates scenes that look more like surrealist paintings than reality. The town's story is as fascinating as its appearance. At its peak, Kolmanskop was home to over 1,200 people and produced nearly 12% of the world's diamonds. The wealth was so abundant that residents imported German furniture, champagne, and created a community with amenities unheard of in most African colonies at the time. They even built a small tram system to transport people through the harsh desert environment. But as quickly as the diamond boom began, it ended. Richer diamond deposits were discovered further south, and by the 1930s, the town's decline had begun. The last residents left in 1956, abandoning this once prosperous outpost to the mercy of the desert winds. The wooden structures were the first to surrender to the elements, but even the sturdy concrete buildings are slowly being consumed by sand. Today, Kolmanskop is accessible to visitors through guided tours from the nearby coastal town of Ludovitz. The site is managed by a joint venture tourism company that has preserved several buildings, including the once impressive gymnasium and theater. Photographers from around the world are drawn to Kolmanskop for its otherworldly aesthetic, especially during early morning or late afternoon, when the light creates dramatic shadows across the sand-filled rooms. What makes visiting Kolmanskop particularly special is the silence. Standing in a sand-filled room, watching dust particles dance in beams of desert sunlight, you can almost hear the echoes of the past. The absolute quiet is occasionally interrupted only by the whisper of shifting sand, a sound that serves as a gentle reminder of nature's patient but inevitable reclamation of all human endeavors. But what if an abandoned place wasn't simply forgotten, but actively sealed off from the world? Our final destination may be the ultimate time capsule, a Mediterranean resort where the 1970s never ended, frozen by conflict for nearly half a century. Our final destination brings us to the Mediterranean island of Cyprus, where behind barbed wire and military checkpoints lies what was once called the French Riviera of Cyprus. Varosha was a premier tourist destination in the 1960s and early 70s, with luxury hotels lining pristine beaches, attracting celebrities like Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, and Brigitte Bardot. Today it stands as a 2.3-square-mile ghost town, frozen in 1974, when the Turkish invasion of Cyprus forced all its 39,000 residents to flee in a matter of hours. Before its abandonment, Varosha was the modern section of the ancient city of Famagusta and represented the height of Mediterranean luxury. High-rise hotels faced the turquoise waters, nightclubs and restaurants catered to international jet-setters, and the beaches were considered among the most beautiful in the world. The district was home to over 100 hotels, countless shops, and was experiencing a building boom when catastrophe struck. What makes Varosha truly surreal is how completely it was frozen in time, then left to decay for nearly 5 decades while remaining tantalizingly visible yet inaccessible. Imagine rows of high-rise hotels with curtains still billowing from windows broken decades ago. Picture car dealerships, where 1974 model vehicles still sit in showrooms, now covered in dust. Envision department stores with mannequins dressed in 1970s fashions, visible through shattered windows, but protected by military patrols from anyone who might enter. The circumstances of Varosha's abandonment were particularly dramatic. When Turkish forces advanced in July 1974, residents fled with only what they could carry, believing they would return within days once the conflict was resolved. Instead, the Turkish military fenced off the entire district, declaring it a restricted zone that only its forces could enter. For 46 years, Varosha remained completely sealed off, with UN Security Council resolutions forbidding any resettlement except by its original inhabitants. This political limbo created one of the most unusual abandoned places on Earth. Unlike most deserted towns that can be explored, photographed, and even vandalized, Varosha remained largely untouched by human hands while being completely exposed to the elements. The salt air corroded buildings, earthquakes damaged structures, and roads cracked as nature began the slow process of reclamation. Yet because the area was patrolled by military forces, it wasn't subject to the looting and vandalism that typically accelerate the decay of abandoned places. In October 2020, the Northern Cyprus administration, backed by Turkey, controversially reopened parts of Varosha, allowing visitors to walk certain streets and even a small section of beach for the first time in nearly 50 years. This partial reopening has offered a glimpse into this time capsule, though many areas remain off-limits, and the political situation continues to evolve. As our journey through these 10 surreal, abandoned places comes to an end, we're left with powerful impressions of how places once filled with human activity can transform into something entirely different when we depart. Each location tells a unique story about our relationship with the environment, technology, economics, and politics. Yet they all share a common theme: the impermanence of what we create. Pripyat reminds us how quickly our most sophisticated technologies can turn against us. Kolmanskop shows the relentless power of nature to reclaim what we build. Hashima Island demonstrates how economic shifts can render entire communities obsolete overnight. Bodie preserves a moment in American history that might otherwise be forgotten. Craco illustrates how the very earth beneath our feet can eventually reject our presence. Buzludzha stands as a monument to political ideologies that once seemed permanent but vanished in a historical blink. Bannerman Castle embodies one man's dreams slowly dissolving back into the landscape, and Varosha remains suspended in political limbo, a time capsule of a specific moment frozen by conflict. What draws us to these abandoned places? Perhaps it's because they offer a glimpse of a world without us. They satisfy our curiosity about what happens when human activity ceases and other forces take over. They remind us that even our most substantial creations are temporary arrangements of materials that will, given enough time, return to the earth. There's also something deeply compelling about walking through spaces where others once lived, worked, and played. We can't help but imagine the lives that unfolded in these now silent locations. We picture children running through the apartments of Pripyat, miners returning home to Kolmanskop after a day's work, or tourists sipping cocktails on the beaches of Varosha. These imaginings create an emotional connection to places we never experienced in their prime. For those inspired to visit these surreal abandoned places, remember that each requires different preparations. Some, like Pripyat, demand authorized guides and safety precautions. Others, like Bodie, are well-maintained historic sites with regular opening hours. Some remain in legal gray areas or require special permissions. All deserve our respect both for their historical significance and their current fragility. If you do choose to explore abandoned places, remember to follow the urban explorer's creed. Take only photographs, leave only footprints. These sites have survived decades or even centuries of abandonment. Let's ensure they remain for future generations to experience and contemplate. What abandoned places have captivated your imagination? Have you visited any of the locations we've explored today? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey through time and abandoned spaces, subscribe to our channel for more explorations of our planet's most fascinating locations. Until our next adventure, remember that even our most permanent-seeming creations are just temporary arrangements in the long story of Earth. Perhaps that's why these abandoned places speak to us so powerfully. They remind us to appreciate what exists now, knowing that nothing, not even our grandest creations, lasts forever.